Hello, all. It is Thursday and Tuesday, which is normally my women's issue day before Lady Bits was taken up by what was it? Oh yeah, the Loot Crate thing. Just because I wanted to do it. So I wanted to do something today based on the Golden Globes thing on Sunday, but I didn't want to just sort of record something out of my ass that night to be topical. I wanted to be sort of more wide ranging and what we call in the biz evergreen. And there's been a lot of talk about stuff. I've had a lot of public discussions with people about some of the issues involving, Hollywood harassment, women, men, all that stuff. Some public, some private. And those private conversations got pretty real, pretty serious. And I decided to sort of gel it into sort of my reactions to sort of the Oprah moment and use that to branch out into a wider discussion. I do have thoughts on the whole dressing in black thing. If you would like me to talk about that, I can do it on Feedback Friday. Let me know. I can elaborate, but I'd like to kind of zero in on this. And I did write stuff. Without further ado, I'd like to get to it. Now, there are certain quoted articles. My original plan was to put them in, but I am running out of time today. So I will put the links to the various articles in the description box for this video. You can read them for yourself. I wanted to put them up on the screen, but it was either get this done quick and dirty or don't do it at all. So without further ado, here's my prepared remarks. It's only a first draft, so if I stumble or there's an awkward sentence here and there or something is kind of like, meh, this is all kind of raw, so bear with me. I called it, sort of where Me Too, in my opinion, #MeToo should go next. The Oprah Winfrey speech at the Golden Globes was a moment in pop culture parlance. See, already stumbled. Oprah's speech was inspirational, hopeful, and inclusive. All the things that the Me Too movement has often not been. Far from the angry mobs and guilty until proven innocent thinking that has made some people, myself included, concerned, Oprah reset the board in a way that was powerful and, more importantly, productive. Oprah did three very important things in her speech. She set #MeToo in an appropriate historical context. She acknowledged the things that have improved and continue to improve for women. And she offered an inclusive message that reached across race, class, and gender lines. Regarding context, it's important to remember that the #MeToo movement does not treat all sexual assault and sexual harassment as equal, though it should. In some ways it doesn't. Though Kevin Spacey is seen as one of the villains in this whole sweeping piece, the fact that his first on the record accuser was male gets drowned out in the female face of the Me Too campaign. There are reasons for this, but I think it's short-sighted. Sexual assault isn't just about gender or sex. It's about power. And that means that race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and socioeconomic class all factor into the power dynamics behind sexual assault. Even the specific case that Oprah cited, that of Recy Taylor, had a great deal to do with race and geography. Part of the power of Oprah's speech came from the fact that she decided to focus on the story of one woman who was wronged instead of citing statistics and boring the crap out of people. What Oprah didn't get into was that Recy Taylor's attackers admitted to the assault and the jury at the time still didn't convict them. Taylor's family home, which also housed her husband and child, was firebombed by white supremacists. Taylor had to live with an armed guard outside her house just to be safe in her own home. This was the era of Jim Crow, and while people can't do that sort of thing so openly anymore, many of the attitudes still persist because almost nothing has been done to untangle the true core of the mindset that drives a person who abuses other people. A group of researchers in 1976 studied men who answered a newspaper ad looking to interview men who self-defined as rapists. I'm not kidding. They actually posted a classified ad that basically said, like, are you a rapist? And guys answered it. They thought nobody would. You can read the article. But Some of these men even admitted to 10 to 15 rapes and they'd never been caught. These researchers found that people rape when they think that their victim deserves it somehow or because of some greater generalized aggrievement with society. Certain risk factors were identified way back in the 1970s that persist to this day. Don't get mad at me. This is what the study said. Heavy drinking, perceived pressure to have sex, a belief in rape myths such as the idea that no means yes, are all risk factors among men who have committed sexual assault. A peer group that uses hostile language to describe women is another one. That's right from the article. Another risk factor, good old narcissism. Apparently, according to these scientists, scoring high on measures of empathy overcomes many other risk factors. Empathy. Unfortunately, empathy is something many boys are discouraged from developing. You guys know this. I know you know this. These risk factors involving the greater context of sexual assault provide some answers as to why sexual assault and harassment are such big problems in Hollywood and other fields that tend to dehumanize workers. Hollywood is a hypersexualized land of myths where booze for breakfast isn't uncommon, hostile language flows freely, and narcissism is almost a prerequisite. But Hollywood also includes another major risk factor that these researchers encountered. The men in powerful positions are not the men on screen. They're the men behind the scenes who don't look anything like the men on screen. Quote, repeat offenders often tell similar stories of rejection in high school and of looking on as jocks and the football players got all the attractive women. As these once unpopular, often narcissistic men become more successful, this person quoted for the article suspects that getting back at these women, having power over them, seems to have become a source of arousal. This is all in the link below this article. Now, this doesn't mean, obviously, that all nerds are potential rapists. Again, the study found that high degrees of empathy, which a lot of people who play video games have and do other things in nerdy land have, overcome other factors. What it means is that guys like Harvey Weinstein, in many ways, are textbook serial rapist profiles. Look at it, a bitter, narcissistic anti-jock with a lot of power in his field and a tendency to want revenge against perceived slights. Note that the source of the arousal was found to be the revenge itself. Getting someone to have sex isn't the goal. These guys in this case got off on power, more pointedly using that power to hurt and humiliate people. So some of you may be thinking where I'm going next, that Hollywood loves to create shows that turn these sort of venal bullies into heroes or power figures. You know, Gordon Ramsay, Simon Cowell, Hugh Laurie's Dr. House, Kevin Spacey's turn as Frank Underwood on House of Cards. So many corrupt cop shows, too numerous to mention, and yeah, the elephant in the room, Donald Trump on The Apprentice. Of course, we're seeing an increase in female bullies on TV as well, or at least bullying behavior. The Good Wife really had very little good about her by the end of the series. Her penultimate act, that's the act before her ultimate act, was ultimately humiliating her mentor to win a case. Then there's Lena Dunham. You had to know I'd touch here. Who rose to fame through Hannah Horvath on Girls, or Horvath. I never remember how to pronounce her last name. It's always Hannah. But Hannah is a character we're supposed to believe is just a lovable screw up. But she actually shows a lot of indicators of being a narcissistic bully. She uses people's weaknesses against them. The most notable for me, before I couldn't watch the show regularly anymore, was the confession of Adam Driver's character that he's a recovering alcoholic and Hannah just couldn't even go there right now. What is it? Can't even right now? Sorry, I'm not a millennial. But, you know, he admits something painful and vulnerable. She rejects him. No wonder Kylo Ren is so angry. You see what I did there? Yeah. Joke. I like jokes. Another example. Penny on The Big Bang Theory constantly puts down Leonard. Like crazy mean insults. And this would probably be more noticeable if Sheldon wasn't even more openly abusive to everyone, including his girlfriend, played by, self-alleged feminist Mayim Bialik. Question. If a feminist helps perpetuate abuse myths, is she still a feminist? This, yeah, joke, fine, another joke, but this question is actually central to the war raging inside Hollywood surrounding #MeToo. No subscriber to an ideology ever perfectly executes that ideology. Fair. Mayim Bialik and Lena Dunham both fly the feminist flag, but seem to enjoy shaming other women with fairly alarming regularity. The thing is, the way they conduct themselves correlates with another thing that 1976 study found. Many abusers don't see themselves as abusers, even when they admit to abusive behavior. So Mayim Bialik can describe Sarah Silverman's choice of dress as sad without any self-awareness that she sounds a lot like Donald Trump. Susan Sarandon can also dismiss sexual coercion in an article in The Guardian, link below, as a culture of liberation and suggest that some women found predatory behavior flattering as long as it was by a man smoother, her word, than Harvey Weinstein. And she still got invited to the Golden Globes as some sort of women's advocate because she starred in Thelma and Louise a few decades ago. This is something you need to know about Hollywood. Hollywood's great at confusing real people with the characters they play on screen. Lena Dunham, similarly, can lecture everyone else for years on the principle of believing victims and not see the hypocrisy of doing a complete flip-flop on the issue when her male friend is accused. Remember, sexual abuse happens, but it happens elsewhere. That's the prominent mindset. For the record, again, I'm not a believer until guilty until proven innocent. And that comes to anything. That includes shoplifting, jaywalking, sexual assault. There are ways of resolving some of the murkier situations without findings of guilt. I don't have time to get into that right now, but they do exist. You don't need to burn someone at the stake to help someone move forward. But, again, Lena Dunham's flip-flop was consistent with what those researchers in 1976 found. Abusers don't see themselves as abusers. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is really important to keep in mind. What happened in the study is the men they surveyed would answer yes when asked the question, have you penetrated a woman without consent? They'd say yes. But when these same men were asked if they committed something like rape, they would say no. I know, cognitive dissonance, but this happened over and over and over again. So I come back to this realization that it's easy to get shallow narcissistic people like Lena Dunham on board with the idea that sexual assault happens, #MeToo. It's much harder to get people like Lena Dunham to realize that sexual assault might be committed by someone that she knows. And this is a huge stumbling block on this issue. She's an example of the greater problem in Hollywood, that Hollywood hasn't admitted that on the whole, Hollywood is one of the major sources of these cultural myths that encourage bad stuff. Now, this is not saying that the men surveyed in this study were not culpable for their actions. That's not the same. Seeing warning flags, red flags. Wow, I really mashed that metaphor together. But noticing that there are markers that make a man more likely to commit rape is not absolving him of the crime. There is still accountability. There is still personal accountability at play here. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at these myths that contribute to the thinking that they found way back in 1976, and some of these myths haven't changed. The myths that Hollywood spits out about masculinity, femininity, consent, abuse, stuff like that, the paradigms really haven't changed much since 1976. And Hollywood can't effectively address its dehumanization problem while it continues to be a factory that produces the very myths that contribute to mass dehumanization of certain types of people. In fact, Hollywood dehumanizes, marginalizes more people than it embraces, more types of people than it embraces. Example, the first season of Supergirl, which you guys may have seen me ragey live tweeting because I was like, what is going on? The main character, Supergirl, totally friend zones this really cool guy named Win, who's actually one of the more interesting, supportive, well-developed men on the show. And she friend zones Win while pining after a reimagined James Olsen, who, like all objects of desire in that sort of triangle, starts off as little more than vapid and pretty. Message to guys like Win, you're really kind of worthless, except when we need something from you. It was awful, but Hollywood pumps out a ludicrous amount of transactional humanity, and then we're supposed to believe that everybody cares because they wear black at the Golden Globes. It was a heck of a photo op. It was really powerful. I know I said I wasn't going to get into this much, but give me a moment because somebody asked me about it on Twitter. It was a heck of a photo op when you saw this sea of black. But wearing black isn't exactly a brave act at an award show. It's an excuse to wear black. The thing is, these celebrities do care, but it's in that way that spoiled narcissists care about things. It's not deep caring where you actually have to give something up. Sorry, tea break. I've got a bit of a throat thing going on, but I think it would have been more powerful had they done something that was deliberately a little less glamorous, like plain black with no shinies. Might have said more. Dressed down at award show, something like that. It, like I said, a heck of a collective photo op. It's better than nothing, but it didn't cut through the narcissism. Cutting through the narcissism, which back in 1976 was indicated as a big marker of whether someone was going to be a horrible, monstrous rapist. That narcissism is what Oprah cut through in her speech. And I know some people disagree with me on Oprah. Hear me out. Oprah could have chosen to speak about her own well-publicized sexual assault that began at the age of 9. It's horrifying to read this account. And she could have gone there. But she sees what happened to her in the greater context of dehumanization that also included savage beatings from her grandmother and another woman making her sleep outside on a porch when she went to live with her mother. Winfrey understands personally that dehumanization does not just have a male face or a white face or an evil face. She understands that some people take their pain and create bitterness. Others take very similar pain and use it as the basis of empathy. So for all her faults, and everyone has them, Oprah Winfrey understands when a moment is not about her. Her speech focused on Reese Taylor, Sidney Poitier, her cleaning lady mother, and a beleaguered press corps. She presented herself as part of something bigger. She understood that, yes, she had the potential to inspire in that moment as others who came before her had inspired her, but only by presenting herself as a small part of history instead of as a great woman. Hashtag great woman. Oprah showed something Hollywood usually fails at: humility. Now, Oprah knows her history. Many voices in the hashtag Me Too movement don't, and that's a big weakness. I say this out of desire to protect the potential for real change, not to criticize anybody for the sake of criticism. Hashtag Me Too, before Oprah woke everyone up in 9 minutes of awesome, was The Handmaid's Tale on a perpetual loop. We're really good at describing, in gory detail, the systemic cultural abuse of women. But when it comes to solutions, we get this vague, join the resistance message. We're being asked to trade our past sacrifices for future ones instead of converting our pain into healing. Perpetual victims are not leaders, and Oprah Winfrey chose to lead rather than live as a victim. Her ascent from abused child so poor that she wore potato sacks as dresses to a billionaire media mogul with the ability to capture the imagination of the world is a story of profound hope and possibility. I'm sure she still has her days when her past haunts her, as we all do, but being haunted by parts of your past is a far cry from letting your past keep you from fulfilling your potential. In an award show where an assembly line of white women snarked out bitter one-liners, Oprah rose above bitterness, rose above her personal misery, and contextualized all the suffering in a greater whole of progress. Oprah reached out back to the 1940s to rightly see the path forward based on the progress to this point. Firstly, Reese Taylor did not stay silent. She did not try to appease her attackers. In many accounts of abuse, harassment, and assault, silence of the victim is a major factor. Speaking out is hard. It's really hard. But silence is harder. Speaking out may open you up to attacks from others, even death threats and the destruction of your property. But silence destroys you from the inside by telling you over and over again that you don't matter, that you don't deserve to be heard, that no one will care. Reese Taylor went to the NAACP and found an ally in Rosa Parks. Parks then took up the fight with influential male allies in Alabama. I know, the term male ally has become a punchline, and that really sucks because we can't make lasting change by criminalizing half of humanity. Even Oprah stumbled here. She's allowed. I don't believe in making perfect the enemy of the good, but I have to point this out. Oprah framed her speech in terms of women's progress, and that's fine, since the whole context was that she was the first Black woman to ever receive the Cecil B. DeMille Award. But by merging that moment with the Me Too movement, she perpetuated the myth that all the names of victims of #MeToo sounded like Rose McGowan and Ashley Judd and not Anthony Rapp, even as Kevin Spacey is uttered in the same breath as Harvey Weinstein. #MeToo is flirting with compounding the stereotype that women are natural victims while men are natural predators. There's nothing natural about any of this. We have to stop this and stop it now. Victims look like Anthony Rapp. They look like Terry Crews. The accounts of Amber Heard as a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Johnny Depp tend to leave out the fact that Amber Heard herself was charged with misdemeanor domestic violence in 2009 after a fight with her girlfriend at the Seattle-Tacoma airport. Heard and her ex-girlfriend both claim it was a false charge. Believe who? The real world is much more complicated than a Hollywood narrative. And all this begs the question, the complexities of Amber Heard beg the question, why do we shrug when men hit men, but become horrified when men hit women? Sometimes we even cheer when women hit men, and we call women hitting women a catfight and assign it vague sexual overtones. I mean, wasn't the big climactic moment in Jessica Jones the heroine snapping a guy's neck because he told her to smile more? That's not heroism, that's revenge. So a lot of questions come up. Where's the line between a mistake that happened once or twice in uncharacteristic moments and repeated character-defining patterns of abuse? What's the correct response to abuse when we're reasonably certain it did happen? Is incarceration the correct prescription, or is rehabilitation better for society? Are we collectively responsible for the care and education of the children of abusers who fall into poverty because one or both parents are incarcerated and unable to work? Is the current sex offender registry an effective tool to protect the public, or a scarlet letter that's a life sentence outside of prison? Is it both? These aren't easy questions, and they won't be answered by a hashtag. The larger social consequences of the fallout of intimate partner violence are not felt by rich celebrities who maintain their lifestyle no matter what they're accused of. Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, and company are not going to fall into poverty. Perhaps that's why we feel we have the moral license to treat them as evil incarnate instead of human beings who clearly went down the path of bitterness and revenge instead of empathy. But this is where Oprah's approach comes in. Oprah is attempting to move beyond the question of, are men the problem, to the deeper question of, is how we train men and women to be men and women the problem? This also begs the question, what do we do about how we've contributed to the problem? For a large part of human history, the paradigm has been that men are expected to push for sex and women are expected to refuse until certain conditions are met. This means that in any gendered encounter outside of marriage, someone will win and someone will lose. We overvalue the sexual prowess of men. We demonize women who embrace their sexuality. This has social consequences. Hollywood needs to take a good hard look at both its on-screen and behind-the-scenes outputs. Even as #MeToo is applauded, the film Perfect Thread is being lauded. Another story of a temperamental male artist and his female muse. It's being lauded by critics, including at #MeTooCentral, the New York Times. The film is very well made and well acted, but its core concept is cliche done to death and excuses abusive behavior as passion. Furthermore, did you see that moment when Dakota Johnson walked out on stage in her socially conscious black dress and Mr. Announcer guy goes, "From 50 Shades Freed, Dakota Johnson." For those of you who don't know, 50 Shades Freed is a 50 Shades of Grey movie, and if it follows the book, it's going to involve a happy ending of domestic bliss to cap off a relationship founded on abuse, betrayal, and even violence. And not all of that violence was consensual. I can't blame Dakota Johnson for looking more than a bit sheepish. It was a decidedly awkward moment. We've made romance in media into something inherently unhealthy. I hear about this all the time on Twitter, that affirmative consent is going to kill romance and all this stuff. Romance doesn't have to be unhealthy. The problem is Hollywood gives us our myths of romance, and most people in Hollywood wouldn't recognize a healthy relationship if it was presented to them in a 12-step program. One of the things you have to learn when you learn to adult is that big, overwhelming emotions do not have to put you in harm's way. It should be safe to feel big feelings. Now, some TV shows are managing to make so-called affirmative consent romantic. The Good Doctor managed to put its utterly adorable autistic main character in a PG-rated romantic situation where a woman explained nonverbal consent cues to him. Marvel's Runaways featured a scene where the dumb jock character saves Blondie Miss Perfect Girl from getting gang raped at a drunken party. But she still isn't really interested in him because, spoiler, she's actually a lesbian. But for each of these shows that are reflecting some healthy relationship behaviors, there were at least 3 shows, often with the word Chicago in the title, that show some sort of abusive relationship and make it seem normal or allegedly romantic. And I see this as people who watch 2 out of the 3 Chicago shows that are still in the air. But they are full of coworkers constantly screwing each other, consenting to sex through some sort of apparent psychic link, especially when they're drunk. If you emulate Kelly Severide, you know, the Taylor, what's his name guy, Salt and Pepper, former Mr. Lady Gaga, if you emulate his character on Chicago Fire, expect to eventually get accused of some sort of sexual harassment in the workplace. But Severide is depicted as a bad boy who's actually not a bad guy. Pro tip, in real world workplaces, your manager doesn't care that you're a bad boy who's actually not a bad guy. Your manager cares that you engaged in behavior that might get the company sued. But if guys don't act like bad boys, they get derided. Just like Oprah's longtime partner, Stedman Graham. She mentioned him in the speech. A lot of millennials probably went, who? They probably don't remember all the Stedman jokes from the 1990s. Oprah Winfrey's longtime significant other was pilloried. He was basically what would be known today as a cuck. Yeah, I said cuck. It's funny. Not funny is that the whole cuck label, or what happened to Stedman, we can call it Stedmaning if we want a fancy verby word. This is what happens when men are involved with women who are more famous and powerful than they are. Stedman doesn't seem to care, but my God, what happened to him was still really wrong. If we're going to change the way romance works to make it safer and healthier for all involved, the world needs more Stedman Grahams. Stedman supports his partner, eats the shit that comes with being with a powerful, famous billionaire woman, and doesn't publicly complain about the pure awfulness of a great many people. That is true toughness, not the ability to throw a punch or hurt someone with words. But by the current media paradigm, Stedman is seen as boring, low energy, right? Instead, we get more Sheldon shows, which feature a character that seems to have markers of being a narcissistic sociopath since childhood. Oh yeah, remember also when Sheldon got fired for being insubordinate and his mom traded sexual favors for his job so he didn't have to apologize? Hashtag sick of Sheldon. Hollywood needs a morality infusion, and it's going to come through people like Oprah Winfrey, who are so much more than her flaws, which people are loudly and merrily spreading through the internet right now. Nobody's perfect, people. True strength is not about muscles. It's not about how loud you can yell. It's not about how many mean words you can string together and fling at another person. True strength is the ability to persevere, to inspire and be inspired, and to use what you can to lift up other people as well as yourself. True strength comes from a thankful heart. Hashtag Me Too has to find its thankful heart, but maybe that's not possible because hashtag Me Too is inherently a movement of pain. Perhaps hashtag Me Too's time is over. I'd be okay with that because I'm exhausted having to relive certain things I can't change and quite frankly don't define me. Perhaps we're moving into the era of time's up, to use the movement, the organization that Oprah mentioned, where we stop feeling sorry for ourselves, find power and empathy, and actually create change. Unfortunately, Time's Up still has a punitive focus. It's a legal fund for Hollywood workers who want to file abuse claims. And it's still gendered. Its big coming out took the form of a Dear Sisters letter. What we need is a massive worldwide education campaign that empowers the feminine, diversifies the masculine, and most importantly, celebrates authentic individuals no matter what genders, or lack of gender they identify with. It's not about pronouns, it's about people. We need to encourage media to show that responsible active consent can still be romantic and stop perpetuating scenes of dubious consent as romantic or hot. We need to stop treating sexual assault as a fate worse than death. We need to stop treating sexual assault as the defining moment in a survivor's life. What defines a survivor is what they do with their pain, not the pain itself. We need to tell more stories of people who show different kinds of strength and beauty beyond the physical. Take those win sidekick type characters and show that they can be heroes too. We need to bust the myths regarding what women want in relationships, and women need to stop shaming other women for showing interest in guys who are not traditionally masculine. We need to stop punishing people for not conforming to gender overall without burdening them with labels that they may not be ready to embrace. We need to stop going to war over bathrooms and pronouns and start recognizing that real people's lives can be made better today through simple individual acts of acceptance and kindness. We need to listen actively and not just be silent. Silent leads to resentment, and resentment leads to social problems. We need to focus on healing more than punishment, because healing is something we can always do something about. Attacking someone may feel cathartic in the short term, but it doesn't feel good long term. We can't combat abuse with more abuse. We need to speak truth to power, not scold the powerless. We need to embrace and validate the simple, basic humanity of people, even people who do bad things. And that was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with. I had to accept that the people who had hurt me in the past weren't monsters. They're people. At their core, they were fairly pathetic people too. Yeah, they denied me opportunities. They hurt me. They were unfair to me. They were abusive to me. But the best thing I ever did in any of those situations was to leave the situation instead of fighting a battle I could not win. That isn't an option for many people. We need services to allow people to more easily change jobs if a workplace is abusive. If people aren't stuck in terrible situations, then bad companies will find themselves starved for talent, and their lousy work environments will cause them to be notably less competitive. It's much more productive to reward good behavior than to spend all your time punishing bad behavior. For a narcissist, and remember, narcissism is the core of this problem. For a narcissist, the greatest punishment is to be ignored. Let's focus our energy lifting up and celebrating people we think have done great things instead of turning abusers into household names. Let's magnify hope instead of suffering. Let's stand up and be counted as people others can turn to for support and energy and positive frames of mind. Let's quit the pity party and start celebrating achievement and greatness and kindness. Let's reward accountability instead of just punishing mistakes. Let's make nurturing people something people get awards for. Let's make kindness into glamour. Let's make beauty into something attainable as opposed to the bodies achieved through self-torture and deprivation. Let's define leadership not by who you can crush, but by who you can inspire to be great. Let's show that gentleness is strength, selflessness is leadership, and that greatness is achieved quietly as well as loudly. In other words, let's stop trying to twist ourselves into the molds of masculine leadership stereotypes, and let's reconnect with what's unique and amazing within each of ourselves as individuals. Let's get more voices heard, more opinions at the table, and more people feeling like they matter. Because as long as we live in a society where only great men matter, the rest of us are screwed. We all have greatness in us, but we can't develop that greatness alone. Those who regularly watch this channel have bought into the idea that respect and dialogue can work, and I appreciate that beyond words. I didn't make you do that. I can only hope that maybe I showed you that patience and open-mindedness are worthwhile. For the record, I believe that all of you do matter. This channel would not matter itself unless you made it matter. I never forget that. I do my best to provide content that helps you figure out who you want to be and how to be your best self. I don't care about your identity politics, and I don't like that me being a woman who happens to like computers and science and video games is supposed to mean something. I'm not a monster and I'm not a unicorn. I'm a person. You're a person too. Let's continue to work toward our community where just being a person matters, where it's enough. Me too. You too. Let's make the time.